I believe that every organization on the planet is really an extension of what the leaders believe it is. And if that's true, then not only can that organization reinvent itself over and over and over again, because the leaders are reinventing themselves, it also represents a value system that's lived into being.
Stephen Morris is a brand and culture advisor, author, and speaker. He believes that at its heart, business is a human-to-human venture. Much of what people do, they do unconsciously. People make decisions with their heads, but act with their hearts. This is true for leaders, employees, investors, and customers. Stephen is in the business of bringing that heart, or dare I say love, to the core of leadership and business. Here's his story. Enjoy the show. Stephen, thanks for being on the show. You know, I had the privilege of being on your show, and then you were on another show that I co-host, and I was just so jealous. I was like, I need you on my show. Thanks for being here today.
Oh, Justin, anytime. We're famous friends, and, I just love having conversations with you. So let's dive into anything that you want to talk about.
All right. I'm going to break the mold a little bit because I know you're the guy I can do it with. Traditionally, I'm sure you've listened to all my episodes. Traditionally, I go back and find out kind of where you grew up, where you started, because I think there's a lot of origin story that creates a lot of context to how people get to where they're at. And I'm sure we could go back there. But I just want to start out with a statement and kind of see where this goes, because this is one of my favorite things. And I hope you appreciate this. Every email I get from you, because I'm signed up to your newsletter, which I think is brilliant. You're like one of 4 I read, so I love it. But every time I read it, I go to the very bottom, and I've said this to you before, I'm going to say it again. I love this. And you say it on the bottom of your email. I think it's also the header of your website. There's nothing more powerful than a united group of souls ignited in a common cause with love at the core. Tell me where that came from. Tell me, why that is something that is everywhere when I have a chance to interact with you and your brand.
Well, I can talk more about why it's important and what it means to me in the world of work and frankly, the life that I live, and less about where it came from. But I will say a few words about where do we get any creative insight? It comes from this unknown place. I sometimes refer to that as the world of possibilities. We can call that the creative realm. In the poetic world, they call it darkness or the unseen. And frankly, it's, ideas come to you, and typically they're hard-earned and lived into being. So, when I remember scribbling that down in a journal and fiddling around with the sentence, it didn't actually take a lot of fiddling. It just kind of came to me. And the first version I wrote of it, it didn't have the "with love at the core." And I thought about it, and I thought about it, and I thought about it, and I thought about, well, this feels true to me. And how do I, kind of, before I go shouting something out from the mountaintops and all that kind of thing, I actually do think about this stuff before I send it out there, even my blog. I thought, well, is it true? It feels true to me, and is it true? And how could I demonstrate or get the sense that it could be more true for myself and the people around me? And it's interesting. I went into history. I looked at it from the lens of history first and foremost, and I thought, about the Roman Empire, and I thought about the Allies coming together in World War II, and I thought, oh, well, wait a minute. When you put love at the core, that's where the magic really happens. And so when I put that statement in, I knew I was taking a risk, because it is a business positioning statement for me. It's my purpose, promise, and why I do what I do. I think it's true. And I also think I'm taking a risk when I'm talking about love at the core, because then we get into a conversation about, well, what do we mean by love at the core? And, a business leader that might consider hiring me or working with me, or even thinking about, is this true for them? They then have to ask themselves, or get to ask themselves, where does the love in my business exist? Where does love in my heart exist for what I'm doing and why I'm doing it? And how then did I turn this into this most powerful entity that has a unified force with a common cause? And, I've heard two really powerful things related to this. One of which is that I want a statement like that in my business that's as powerful and profound. Can you shape like something like that for us? And this is typically a business leader talking to me when I'm helping them with, their brand, their culture, et cetera. And then the second thing is really two things related to the love question, which is, what do we mean by love? And I did hear, and I have heard, and in fact, I heard it recently, a client reached out to me, or a potential client reached out to me back in, I think it was November, and they said, this whole love business is awesome, but you're 5 years ahead. Like, the world's not ready for this yet.
And when was this? When was this said to you?
This was back in November.
Okay.
Yeah. And I said that this is a global company based in Australia doing work around the world. They have offices in Australia and San Francisco, and doing a lot of work in South Africa. And he said, I would love for this to be true here and now, but I don't think the world is ready for it. And I said, I don't care. I think, and this is sort of the Moneyball statement, which is, there's a line in Moneyball that goes, the first one through the fence is the one that gets bloody, and somebody's got to talk about it. And I said, why not me? I believe it. And yeah, I may be taking a risk here, but think about the things in your world that you love. And those are the things that you're going to put your most energy into, your most passion into, and that's where you invest your life.
Well, let me push on that a little bit.
Yeah.
Because I believe I fully understand what you're saying here, but just to, put a little bit of a point on it, you were most nervous about the word love in the context of business leadership.
Yeah.
And I don't want to assume, right? But I would say that you think that way, or we're nervous about that because maybe some high-powered or well-respected, whatever adjective you want to use to describe the leader that you're going after, may not see the value in that. Is that fair? And how long did you really wrestle with that?
Like a day, less than 24 hours. Yeah. I call it a wrestling match, but I don't think there was no other word, and there was no way I could extract it from the statement, and I feel good about it.
Well, because I would say, as a fellow brander, right, two things came to mind. One, great. It automatically, helps you focus into the type of client that understands that word or is intrigued by that word and wants to have that as part of their leadership and or part of their culture, right? So that's a bonus. Yeah. And two, my man, it feels like you, and I can't pay you a higher compliment. Like, when I think of you, like I said, I couldn't wait to talk to you today, because for the listeners, we're recording this on a Monday, which I'm sorry, we're recording on a Monday. I'm always kind of low energy on a Monday. And it's funny, right before this, I told my wife, I said, oh man, I can't have any more caffeine. I'm so jacked up for this meeting. I'll start talking really fast. But it just really feels authentically you. Mm-hmm. But I want to ask a question about another statement that you've said a few times.
Can I insert something into that?
Of course.
I appreciate the compliment and the kind remarks.
Don't worry, I'm going to cut that out.
I actually don't see the statement about me at all.
Really?
It is about the work that I do, but it's everything that I put out there is about you and them and what this world can be. And yeah, obviously it's about me because I'm living this in some level of truth, but I couldn't care less that it's about me.
Yeah. Let me rephrase that. What I really was saying there was, it feels authentically you, as how you perceive the world and where you see value in leadership, right? To what you said earlier.
Yeah.
You feel, right, that's at the core of so many really deep human connections and really empathetic, human-centered leadership. If you don't have that word, I don't think any of those things can exist.
Yeah. Agreed. Completely agree. Yeah.
And by the way, that was a joke earlier. You didn't laugh at all. I told you I'm going to cut out all the compliments, but we'll leave that in there. So you're saying a statement that I say often, and I was thinking about this weekend because I kept saying this statement, and I just want to see how you would respond to this. But when you say the statement, it feels true to me, or it feels true to X, what does that mean to you?
It means that I don't have scientific data or data, qualitative, quantitative data to back it up. And, because of the world that I work in, I do believe in data to some extent, but data doesn't really create anything. Data only measures, as we know, things that happen from the past. So, quote unquote, true is, if someone were to say, well, give me the data to support this, I would probably point to the allies in Europe and say, well, we bonded together on a global platform to defeat a common enemy, and we did that with love at the core and a unified front and igniting behind a cause. And so that's kind of the only data. That's what I mean by truth. I haven't studied this comment per se, although if you could say I've lived the study of it, but I don't have data to back it up.
Yeah, you have some use case experiences, right, and some field testing. The reason I ask you that is because one of my kids asked what I meant by that, and what I said is, it feels like an absolute to me, like inside, like to my bones, to my soul, like that feels that unbelievably a fact without being able to prove it. I guess we're kind of saying the same thing.
Yeah.
So I was just curious.
That feeling of irrefutable, like it's not a strategic consideration that I tend to go into with that. It's a somatic experience that I have when I hear a statement like that, or when I read something that feels absolutely true. Like I literally feel it in my body.
I love it.
Yeah.
So I think for me, what's interesting when I think about you just trying to explain what you do, there's so many bits and pieces to it. I look at you as sort of this like awesome, like Lego sculpture, right? Where you have all these different colored Legos that all describe a different skill set for you. But if you and I were, the classic, if you and I were sitting at a pub or a coffee shop and I leaned over, I'm like, man, Stephen, what do you do? How do you describe that?
Yeah. If we're in a completely business context setting, I would say that I'm a brand and culture building expert that weaves brand and culture together with business strategy to help create an organized system or a company that has integrity inside and out. If then we were to go further, I would bring it into the metaphorical realm, and I would say I'm a root, sap, and soil person. And what I do is I'm sort of a business arborist, if you will, that I work from an organizational perspective in the root, sap, and soil of a company. So what does the roots do? A healthy root system it really is the foundation for a healthy tree. And if you want to harvest from that tree, either fruit or nut, then you have to have a healthy root system. The sap is the culture, the lifeblood of the tree. It's the people that feed all the energy up and down and all around. And so that's got to get worked with, and that's got to be considered within the equation. And then the soil is kind of interesting because it combines things that we can and things that we cannot control. So soil has to do with sort of our market, our environment, our society, and we can add nutrients to soil, but we cannot control the weather. So I help from a market position understand how to work with the forces that we can and can't control, so that we have a healthy organism, and ultimately we have a healthy, not only tree, but ideally forest. So I know that's all in the metaphor, but I love
it. It's a beautiful way to explain what you do. I'd not heard you talk about the soil before, but I love that soil metaphor, especially the part where there's things you can and cannot control, but yet they all feed the tree, right?
Yeah.
That's beautiful, my man.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to get into your book and some other beautiful things about you, but I am going to go a little bit back. So I think there's usually some really interesting things here. So you're in California, San Diego now. Is that where you're at currently?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you're not a California kid, are you?
No, I'm born and raised in the East Coast, and I bounced around a bunch of East Coast cities until I think I realized I belonged out here. I moved out here in '94. I could tell you that whole story, and it's kind of a pilgrimage, so to speak. But yeah, I'm definitely born and raised in the East Coast.
Okay, so you went to school on the East Coast. I think you went to school at Temple. Do I have that right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Did you study design?
My master's is at Temple University Tyler School of Art in Philadelphia. So that's where Paula Scher went to school, and many, many other really well-known Paul Sheriff, a great package designer. I went to school with Kristen Samis. She and I were in the same graduate program together. She's a great professor out at Penn State now, married to Lanny Samis, who taught one semester there when she was in school. But yeah, that's where I went to school. That's where my master's is.
Awesome. So you bounce around.
Yep.
The U.S. Now, were you bouncing around trying different jobs out, different towns out? What was kind of the thing that kept leading you west? What were you doing?
Yeah, well, undergrad school was up in Boston, and then grad school was in Philadelphia, and I'm born in Delaware, so 30 minutes outside of Philly. And then after graduate school, I moved down to the DC area. I actually spent a little time in Maryland, and then down to the DC area, where I bounced around a handful of agencies there. And, Justin, what I was doing is working myself to the bone. Like I was working at, some people may know this firm, Supon Design Group in DC, and they produced a lot of books. And I was a creative director for them at the ripe age of 26 years old, and like working 6.5 days a week kind of thing. And I wouldn't call it a work environment. It was like one of those deals. If you don't show up Saturday, don't bother coming in on Sunday kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And I thrived because I worked hard and I didn't take too much from the owner there. So he kind of let me be with my team. And then, I had a great team, and we did a lot of great work. But really what I was working too much, and my wife and I had just gotten married, and I was like, look, this is going to go one of two ways. I'm going to end up working for an agency or be in the agency world and not love it, or I'm going to go somewhere else and reclaim my life, quite frankly, and try and be married. Figure out what that's all about.
Yeah.
And so my wife and I literally spent our first anniversary in a Ryder truck driving cross country to San Diego, where we really didn't know anybody. And I actually thought that I would come out here and get a job. And it just so happened that the sophistication of the agencies in town wasn't anywhere close to what I was used to in bigger cities like DC. And, I had some freelance work for a bunch of environmental nonprofits that I was working with, World Wildlife Fund and Alaska Wilderness Foundation, Southern Utah Wilderness Foundation. And I just kept doing freelance work. And one thing led to another. I was doing freelance work for nonprofits out here, and I had two criteria, one of which is that they had to have the budget to produce what I was talking about, and I had to present to the board of directors of whatever concepts. And I knew that on those boards were other business owners. And I thought, well, if I'm doing good work here, maybe they'll see that, maybe they'll recognize that. And of course, that one thing turned into another. Hey, you need to do work for us over here. And so it was at that point that I'm like, oh, okay, well, I'm hanging a shingle, and, was working out of the house with two interns in the house and dogs barking as a client showed up to a meeting. Like, it is time to get an office. And
been there. Yeah.
Yeah. That was in '94.
That's awesome. Where did you meet your wife?
I met her in school. We're going to go into a very scandalous story here.
Oh, yeah, this is what the show is all about.
Of mine when I was teaching at a university in Maryland. And so I was, 25, 24 years old, right out of grad school. And we met during that and got married a couple of years later. It's hilarious.
I see that you just put a period on that. That's as deep as we're going there. Okay.
Yeah, I won't even go into it. Yeah.
So was your undergrad in design as well, or was that in psychology?
No, my undergrad was in a combination between fine art, psychology, philosophy, and sociology. And so I went up to a small liberal arts school called Salem State, just north of Boston, and studied with protege of Mark Rothko up there. And I really thought I was going to be a painter. And so he was teaching in their art department. I had a connection through somebody there, and I just knew I needed to leave home, get out of my family environment growing up in Delaware, and went up to Boston, this great little liberal arts school right on the water. And because it was liberal arts, I was like always fascinated with what makes us tick as humans, right? Mm-hmm. Let's study some psychology, some philosophy, some sociology. And so my major is in fine art, and then I have minors in psychology and in philosophy.
It's interesting you say that. I went to a small liberal arts college as well, and I was a fine arts major, and thinking that I wasn't good enough to make a career as an artist, I decided to become a teacher. And then I learned about design, so I ended up having a fine arts degree with emphasis in design and a minor in teaching. But I share that with you because all of my extra humanity classes were in sociology, psychology, anthropology, which I had no idea at the time serves me incredibly well when it comes to brand and creativity. And now in the position I'm in now is more leadership and strategy. So let's talk.
It's actually the upstream curiosity of those things that probably serves folks like you and I that are wired in that way. And while the education I think is important, having some understanding of the humanist psychology and what that actually means, and anthropology, things like that. But I think it's the curiosity that led us there that keeps feeding us into the things that we keep doing and reinventing ourselves.
I couldn't agree more. But I also feel as you get older in your career, or just as a person on this planet, and you start to look around, especially the last few years, just some of the things that have gone on that, I mean, if you haven't shifted or taken a look at things differently, then maybe you're sleepwalking. But that's really what brought us back together. I've known about you. I've known you for years and years and years. Big fan of your work and what you do. And I actually saw that statement that we started the podcast out with, and I was just like, this is someone that's at a space that is really interesting. I want to talk and learn more. So you had an agency, I think, for 20 plus years, correct?
23 years. Yeah.
So tell me what happened, because you don't run an agency anymore. You now are in a new space. So what was the shift?
Yeah, in 2013, I did a time tracking exercise, and I created a spreadsheet and looked at how I was spending my waking hours over it was about a month, maybe a 6-week period. And, after that 6-week period of tracking on my time, and it was not just my time at work, but it was also my time outside of work and waking hours, and tracked it in 30-minute increments, and then did an analysis of those times, those actions that I was doing in my waking hours at work and not at work, what percentage were in what Gay Hendricks would call my zone of genius. And of course, that begs the question, well, what's your zone of genius? And, that's another whole consideration. It's different for everybody, but mine has to do with, what I now call human artistry, which is in the world of work, there would be a lot around ideation and strategy and things like that. And what I realized, I was spending only about 10% of my time in anywhere close to that realm, even as I were to label it back then. And I said, that is not good. If I were a surgeon or a doctor giving an analysis of myself, I would say, you're an unhealthy middle-aged man and something has got to change. And so I said, well, you know what? I built this beautiful, very profitable prison around me. It is time to reconsider, reapproach. And then, so it was at that point I began to package it up so it could be merged with another company, which ended up what had happened. I got other offers. There was a juggernaut organization that wanted to buy me out, and we could get into a whole conversation about what an exit strategy looks like, but that would have locked me up for another at least 5 years within that organization. I was like looking at the calendar saying, nope, I want to go on and do more genius zone work. So that was 2017 when I merged the company and stepped out and started doing what I'm doing now.
All right, hold on. I had not heard this part of the story before. So you had made a spreadsheet of all of your waking hours. So tell me how long did you do the study for?
6 weeks. Yeah.
Dude, that's a lot of data.
It's a lot of data. And I thought, well, if I take it over a month, that's just 1 month out of a calendar year. So at least I got to extend it out from there. My initial intent was to do it for 2 months, and I was like, screw it. This is enough data. I'm just going to
I can go ahead and
I can extrapolate this out of right. Yeah. And, I know enough about, research to do that. And I picked a spring month and a half. So it wasn't, December, and it wasn't summertime. And, it was sort of, it was just happened to be during that time of the year when I was like, screw this, this is not working. I've got to figure out what am I spending my time on. And, honestly, I was spending most of my time on running the business, which part of it I love, but it wasn't my genius zone work.
Yeah. Yeah. That's another thing that I really appreciate about you. I think we interact with a lot of similar things and writings and that sort of thing, everything from the Hendricks to Father Roar to, I think you and I talked about the Conscious Leadership Group, the work Jim Dethmer and those guys do. I'm sure you've heard of it.
Yeah,
if you haven't read
Diana
it.
Chapman is a friend, and
she is. She's the best.
They're awesome people up there.
Yeah, they're pretty amazing. So, okay, you start this new business, and then from the time you started to kind of how you're positioning yourself now, that had to be just a life-giving exercise to really dig into you, and we'll say just for the listeners. So. Again, correct me if I'm wrong here, but really the concept of the zone of genius is that we all have unique gifts that are really aligned with who we are as a individual. And we often, unfortunately, only are in that zone very briefly at times, and we end up doing all the things around that. So we end up not doing the kind of work we're truly gifted at doing. Is that a fair?
Yeah, just for clarity's sake, add just a couple of layers.
I just need to jump in here and share with you one of my favorite authors, finds, couples. Gay and Katie Hendricks run the Hendricks Institute, an international learning center that teaches core skills for conscious living and conscious loving. For more than 40 years, their work has been to assist people in opening to more creativity, love, and vitality through the power of conscious relationship and whole person learning. They are passionately committed to creating a worldwide community of people with whom they can explore new heights of love, creativity, and well-being. I tell you what, I enjoy their videos, their books, and what Stephen is about to introduce is a game changer. The Zone of Genius. Check them out at hendricks.com.
Gay Hendricks would say that there's 2 levels at least that exist below the zone of genius, which is the zone of competence and the zone of excellence. And the zone of competence, which we're all familiar with, is, things that we are competent at doing and we do well. And then the zone of excellence takes that competency and we do those things and do them well, but we get handsomely paid for them or well compensated for them. And what Gay says, which I completely agree with, because this is what happened to me, is we get stuck in that zone of excellence because of all the financial trappings and the all kinds of things that happens within that. And one of the things that I realized that I had to do was release myself from that zone of excellence and re-identify with the zone of genius. And I think there's a lot to talk about with who do you identify with in order to live yourself into something. So if I identify myself with being the CEO of this agency, and I get sort of enraptured with that, then I can stay in that realm. But if I now begin to create a new identity, or I self-identify with this thing that I call human artistry, or as a consultant and advisor, you have to shed the previous identity in order to live yourself into another one. And that's how we go into that zone of genius.
And that's also part of is that some of the work that you do as well with some of your clients, depending on where they're at?
Yeah, so when an organization's going to the next level, they have to, we know this in the world of brand, once thinking about, well, what is our brand and how are we seen by the world and how do we see ourselves internally? The only way we evolve our brand truly into an exponentially different realm is to begin to see ourselves in that. And so there's this internal restructuring of the way that we think, our organized systems around the way that we work. And here we're getting into leadership team and potentially culture. And only then do we concern ourselves with the outside world, which is the exterior side of brand. So it is a big part of what I do. And, and typically that starts with a core leadership team who is thinking deeply about who are we now and who do we wish that we would become and how do we envision ourselves towards that direction and live it wholeheartedly so that it becomes a reality.
Beautiful. Speaking of beautiful,
yeah,
let's talk about The Beautiful Business. It's your latest book. Mm-hmm. And thank you again for sending me a copy. I love this book, but can you share with the audience what The Beautiful Business is about and what is, in your definition, a beautiful business?
Yeah, so it's always helpful to define what do we mean by beauty first, so we have context. And in Western culture, we tend to see beauty as the exterior or something, and that's not what I'm talking about. I'm really talking about the Japanese aesthetic principles of beauty, which has to do with things that absorb harmony, integrity, reciprocity. And so when we think about this felt sense of beauty or experiential sense of beauty, it is automatically now this thing that we have a sense of awe with. It sort of transcends what we can even perceive or visually see as something beautiful, and we feel it and has an impact on us. And when we think about, well, how can that be for the world of business? If you think about yourself as an employee or a customer of an organization that you feel is changing your life for the better, moving you, and you feel these ordinary moments of awe or transcendence with it, then at those points, it can be a beautiful business. And beauty, by the way, is not a constant state. It's something that we're always striving towards. And so a beautiful business really is a business that operates with a strong sense of integrity. That which exists internal is represented externally. It comes from its own value system, which it deeply believes in. And then it has this sense of reciprocity in that it's caring for all the things that are absorbed within the business. It could be the people, it could be the communities, it could be the resources that it's working with. And all of those things are in lockstep with one another. So really the core of it has to do with reciprocity and integrity.
So you talk often about the alignment of brand and culture and leadership philosophy. Mm-hmm. Why brand? Why is that important? Why is that valuable? And I'm asking, we have clients who are leaders and they'll be like, well, yeah, I mean, brand, the design thing. I was like, no, listen, when we're talking about your brand, we're talking about much more than design.
Yeah.
Which I'm sure you would agree with, but how would you respond to a leader or that question, really, not just a leader, but yeah, I get the leadership thing. I understand, culture is the thing, but why is brand a part of that mix?
Yeah. Well, the way I define brand is it's really about character. And so again, I'm going to, let's go back into the humanist psychology discussion. I believe that every organization on the planet is really an extension of what the leaders believe it is. And if that's true, then not only can that organization reinvent itself over and over and over again, because the leaders are reinventing themselves, it also represents a value system that's lived into being. And because people experience that value system only through the behaviors, and sometimes through how it communicates and how it positions itself, and, but really to the degree that it walks its talk, then all of a sudden it's really about character. And so character is this felt sense that I believe and I know that every person has, whether or not they're conscious of it, and every business has it too. And so when we overlay the idea of humanistic psychology, which is how we behave in the world and how we see the world and interact with the world. When a business begins to operate with that level of consciousness in what it's doing, it then all of a sudden has this orchestrated system that it is character defining. And that's what I mean by brand. And certainly part of that has to do with how say a design firm represents it externally. And that could be, voice, tone, or even imagery, and the fusion of that through story. But upstream from even the voice, tone, and imagery is the belief system that defines that voice, tone, and imagery, and the stories that it puts out into the world. And therefore, it's going to have impact, and it's character that has impact. And so that's what I believe a brand actually is at the end of the day.
I can rally around that any day of the week, my friend.
Yeah.
So this may be somewhat of an unfair question, but I'll ask it anyways. I have one question with two parts, and you can answer them collectively if they're similar or different. But business leaders who want to run a beautiful business, and or creative leaders, what are the things they struggle with the most? Or what are their biggest blind spots that you go in and it's a pretty regular thing that you need to help them shift on or be open to or see differently?
Yeah. Well, I don't know there's nothing regular about it. So here's what tends to happen. It's had a business leader. Let's take a professional services business leader. They've had some version of an awakening. And David Brooks would call this in his book, The Second Mountain. The first mountain of life is the mountain of success. And it's the mountain that people, and especially business leaders, tend to climb early on, depending on how old they are. But let's say pre-midlife. 30s and 40s, you're climbing the mountain of success. You're gaining all kinds of accolades and maybe money and even responsibility. And you climb the peak of that particular mountain and you look around at the view and you say, really? Is this all there is? And so the awakening, and it could be many versions of awakening. People are going to hear awakening and they think it has to be a spiritual awakening. I think it can be. It doesn't have to be. But they have an awakening that really begins to wonder, what is more in life that I want to go seeking? And they're thinking about that not just through their life, obviously, but when they look at their business and say, okay, great, it's very successful, it's coming along great, but I don't feel fulfilled. That awakening intersection happens at that particular point. So it's at that point that they begin to wonder, well, if there's a something else, what is that something else? And I think it's at that point they begin to think about, okay, well, how can I bring a stronger sense of character or more integrity and impact within the organization that I'm building and working towards, while still making great money, but having the bigger effects within the world that I want to have happen. And, some people begin to think about legacy at that point. And so it's at that point people begin to think about, well, okay, maybe beauty is part of this. They probably don't come to that on their own, but if they've read the book, they're thinking, oh, maybe this is an attribute, because it's about integrity and reciprocity, then how do I apply this into my world? And so that how-to question is usually when the proverbial phone rings, when I get an email that says, okay, I get it. I'm all in. I get what you're talking about. How do we make this happen, kind of thing? And it's at that point we put our heads together and figure out, how do I help them? But depending on where they're at. So let's go back to your question. This now is like the everydayness. Get into the everyday. The things that they're up against is typically the trappings of success, just like I have experienced, and I suspect you have too, which is how do we release ourselves from those trappings of success and double down on those things of the impact points? And how do I make commitments to myself and to my leadership team that go into greater impact while carrying success, all the other metrics of success, such as a profitable business, along with us? And then we're not talking about us, we're talking about them, right? So who are we trying to impact? what are we trying to impact? In what ways? Is it something environmental? Is it something that has to do with the world of our people? Is it a customer, even though it might be a technology product? How do we make their lives better in some way, shape, or form? Or how do we double down and make their lives exponentially better in some way, shape, or form? And those are the kinds of questions that I love getting involved in, the C-suite and the boardrooms. And while they're not ordinary, they're ordinary questions that every business leader ought to be thinking about, in my opinion, anyhow. What kind of impact are we really trying to make? And this goes into, I'm going to go into a rant here for a second around purpose statements. I think there's been an overwashing of purpose statements in the world of companies. And a lot of companies are raising their hands saying, because of the zeitgeist of society is wanting purpose, saying that we're a purpose-driven company too. But what they don't do is the self-accountability that talks about, well, if I say that our purpose is this, what does that mean from an impact standpoint? And I think consumers, or even in the B2B world, have far less tolerance for people giving lip service to things, and they're going to hold organizations accountable for saying, if they say their purpose is X, Y, and Z, and they're not living up to it, then they're going to jump ship, because trust now is all of a sudden diminished within that organization. And I think what should be happening is a shift from purpose statements to impact statements, to talk about, because really a purpose is, how are we impacting the world? Or more precisely, how are we impacting the world of the people that we're intending to serve? And if business leaders hold themselves accountable, truly measurable and accountable for those things, now all of a sudden we're talking about something.
Yeah, I mean, that's one thing I took away from reading your book too, was this aligning your direction for an impact at so many different levels of your business, individually, but also those around you that you impact, and creating a possibility for that reality to exist, right?
Absolutely.
And so I was giggling because we do those kind of statements. They're internal statements to really help align leadership. But I hear what you're saying. It's a piece of a bigger puzzle, but it shouldn't always be like, what you're screaming off the mountaintop as the whole reason you exist. I look at it more as like a tool to help get everyone kind of reading from the same, map, going the same direction, that sort of thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things that I just kept thinking to myself here is, you grew up on the East Coast and kind of traveled across country, and you ran a successful agency for years and years. And now I look at the people you interact with, and I see, kind of the lens that you look at life with so much of the tools that are around us from great thinkers, great authors, great writers. If you were to sit and look back at yourself, 20 years ago, Stephen, what do you wish you could tell yourself?
20 years ago.
You can pick it 20 years, 30 years ago,
Sure.
whatever. And I want to, and first of all, I'm going to take this pass off. I'm going to make it harder for you. I understand that a lot of what you would say now, you could never have gotten there had you not gone down the path that you have gone. So I know I'm asking you somewhat of an unfair question, but I will say this. I wish I could go back and tell myself two things. One is really understanding the zone of genius concept, meaning you're really good at these things. You got into this because you love these things, right? So the more you can stay in that space, the more fulfilling it will be for you. And the second is to not take myself so seriously or my work so seriously, because I spent so much energy getting way too into it.
Yeah.
There, I took the pressure off.
That's really good. Yeah. I think, well, there's probably a single piece of advice that stems off into a couple different directions. I would tell that younger version of myself to fugitive yourself from the expectations of society. And what I mean by that is, so I'll personalize this, but it's universal to a certain extent. I was raised into a world and to a family system that required, because I was a human, the care, the nurturing, the safety, the security, and the connection and love of my family and the people around me. And at the same time, I was then indoctrinated into a belief system of, here's what society expects from you. And, I would tell that person at that age okay, great, safety and security exists, and you've loved and cared for your family. Become a fugitive to all those things. Don't pay any mind to what other people think about you or what society thinks you ought to be, and go pursue your life as if it were truly your own. And so when I talk about human artistry, I wish I knew about human artistry then what I know about it now.
That's great. Thinking about just the world as it is now, you and I have had a few conversations about just the trials and tribulations of the last several years when it comes to being a leader. I refuse to look at this as anything other than a teachable silver lining experience, although it's been hard for me individually and us as an organization. What do you feel these days that maybe leaders are, I read every day, leaders, tend to blame their employees in the workplace, and it makes me sad that they're not taking responsibility for their leadership, because I think, for example, I think we did a lot of great things over the last couple of years, and we did a bunch of things wrong. And I'm grateful for that. I'm not grateful for maybe the individuals that hurt and or the pain that, I personally went through. But what do you feel leaders are getting wrong right now when it comes to kind of the current state of the workplace?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things, and I don't know that I would position this as wrong. I think it's sort of where we're headed, although there is one wrong. So I'll say the wrong, and then I'll talk about what I think is really happening kind of below the surface on certain realms of key things in the world of business, and especially in the world of work. So the first thing I would talk about is, the thing that, so we have this, the great quit, or the great resignation and the big quit, right? So those are the top level terms that people had. And now you see this big pendulum swing for organizational leaders to double down on culture and care for people. And I think what's going to happen there is there's going to be a backlash to that. And leaders who have, quote unquote, overcared for people, they're going to find out that people still are checked out. People still some people don't want a job or don't want this job or whatever. And that, workplace, either dysfunction or really workplace disengagement is going to be a thing. And it's going to continue to be a thing. And because leaders have now overextended themselves, they're going to go into their own healing process, and they're going to say, oh, what do I need to heal within myself or within my leadership team, partially on a personal side and partially on the business side, so that we then end up being truly a company of integrity. And so that we're not responding or reacting to what culture says with the big quit. We're actually just really caring for people. We really do just want to care for people. And it's part and parcel to who we are. And we're caring, and I'm caring as a business leader for myself at the same time. So I think there's going to be a healing journey that takes place within that. And we're going to probably see a backlash. And I think really what falls underneath of all this is the recognition that we are all inextricably connected to one another. And that if leaders are not caring for themselves, how can they possibly care for somebody else? And if they're over caring for somebody else, then to what extent are they caring for themselves? And then, a culture doesn't exist in the silo. It is a microcosm to a larger extent of our society. And by the way, that's now a global society that, maybe thanks to the internet, is living at the speed of the internet can live. And that, the common denominator is that we're all inextricably connected to one another. I think people who wake up to that realization and live with that reality are going to treat everything in their world, including their work, very, very differently.
Wow. I love it. Well, actually, I don't love all of it, but I get it.
These are not easy things, right?
No. And, I was processing there and I just kind of said words, but if to be more in tune, I think that I fell into that same thing. I think what's interesting, and I believe I've said this often. I have made many, many mistakes over the years, and I hopefully have acknowledged them and learned from them and grew from them and went on. But there are definitely times where I haven't been transparent enough as a leader of saying, hey, this is hard for me too. This is painful for me too. I love that you're coming to me for the answers. And right now, I just don't know. I know that we're going this way, and I know that we're going to make it through, but I don't know exactly what are some of the next steps. Yeah. And I think, at least for me, over the last few years, is I felt I had to have all the answers. And I thought that I was doing that to protect my team, when I think there's many times that stopped me from listening and being more in touch with what was actually going on.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't think you're alone in that, I really felt the need to care for my team, especially during the pandemic. And I think that sense of protection is a good thing to a point, but and trust me, I've lived with this too, where I've overprotected my team and other leaders around me from things that I didn't necessarily need to protect them from in hindsight. That the reality is, or at least my belief of the reality is that, as a team, we're all in this together, even though the leader has certain responsibilities for setting vision and removing obstacles to achieve that vision. And I think if a leader just does those two key things, and allows then the team to step forward and share in the responsibility to move towards those objectives or that vision, then we're truly all in this together. So you go back to, there's nothing more powerful than a united group of people ignited in a common cause with love at the core. And everyone has to have that love in order to be united around the things and ignited about the cause. And, again, my vision of a great leader is someone who just knows what that vision is and can articulate it, and then removes the obstacles as much as possible to get there. And, trust me, Justin, I know it. I feel it. I've been there too. I have overextended myself. I'm a protector and a provider by nature. And those elements within me have come out in some unhealthy ways. And I see it in other business leaders too. And even some of the coaching work that I do with executives is to, enable mutual responsibility in moving things forward.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. I know we're at time here, so I want to respect your space, but I shared with you that I'm writing a new book. You actually inspired kind of the more or less the tagline or the subject line, and that is, now is the time to live with radical intent. I'm continuing to explore what's more and more true, and also how to live with more and more kindness to myself first, and then to those around me, just having intention on those things, and really kind of peeling back a lot of the BS that, like you were saying, that you were dealing with in your younger self, right? Living in a space or in an expectation that really wasn't true, which is what you thought it was true, or what you allowed to be true in your paradigm. So, well, my friend,
I suspect, can I just say one thing about what you just shared?
Of course.
I suspect that one thing that I hope you'll write about in this wonderful book that you're about to put out into the world, and I don't want to shape any of the content, but I do believe it takes radical acts of self-love in order to live into radical intent. And that might be for another conversation over that coffee or beer that you mentioned, that we can't give what we don't have. And, there's nothing more powerful than a united group of souls ignited with a common cause with love at the core. We can't give that out unless we love ourselves first and foremost. And maybe in this day and age, that's one of the most radical things that we can do.
Yes. More of that. And that really is what we were just talking about, beforehand, is part of the things that, I struggled with was that. And so, man, this hour went way too fast. Thank you so much. And you know what? We will talk about my book when you have me on your show, when I launch the book. And see what I did right there? Put you right on the spot.
Yeah, bring it on. No, I'd welcome it. Yeah. I can't wait to read the book, and I know what you're up to in the world, and I congratulate you for that and the courage that you're embarking upon to head off into your own zone of genius.
Thanks, brother.
Yeah.
We'll stay in touch. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Justin.
Thank you to my main man, Stephen Morris, for being a wise and heart-led human who believes there's nothing more powerful than a united group of souls ignited in a common cause with love at the core. For more on Stephen, his books, and give his podcast a listen, go to matterco.co, matterco.co. I also want to thank Sleeping at Last for providing our show soundtrack all these seasons. For more on Sleeping at Last music, please go to sleepingatlast.com or search for Sleeping at Last wherever you get your music. And to Design Of's audio engineer, Steve Wick, who loved this episode so much because it made him think of his favorite song that helps him feel beautiful.
And you just make me feel so beautiful. Baby, you're beautiful.
I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did making it. If so, please give us a ranking on iTunes or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Tell others about our show on your social media of choice, and stay tuned for more of Season 9 coming soon. Please follow us on Twitter at Design of Podcast, and check out our site at rule29.com/Design of Podcast. See you next episode.